When we think of the families that shaped Tudor England, the same names tend to dominate: the Howards, the Seymours, the Boleyns, the Nevilles, the Percys. But one clan that is often overlooked is the Parrs, a family who rose not from the ancient nobility, but from the sturdy ranks of northern gentry. The Parr family fortunes were tied to the northwest of England, particularly to Kendal in Westmoreland. The castle still overlooks the town in ruined form. It's often associated with the Parrs today, but they were never actually the lords of it in their own right. Kendal Castle was the seat of the Barons of Kendal, originally held by the de Ross family. The Parrs entered prominence as retainers and tenants of these barons, gradually building up their land holdings through loyal service and a series of shrewd and lucky marriages. By the 14th century, the Parrs were firmly established among the gentry of Westmoreland. Sir William Parr, who died in 1405, served the crown in northern campaigns and anchored the family's reputation as reliable administrators in a region frequently unsettled by raids from across the Scottish border. Over the generations, the Parrs gained estates through marriage connections, most importantly through links with the Ross family, who still controlled the Kendal barony. These marriages didn't ever give the Parrs the castle itself, but they did make them some of the most prominent tenants in the area. They were wealthy, they were visible, and they were increasingly influential. The Wars of the Roses gave the Parrs their first real taste of national-level politics. Like many northern families, they were drawn into the rivalry between York and Lancaster. Some Parrs supported the Yorkist cause, while others showed loyalty to Lancaster. This wasn't unusual. For families without the resources of the Percys or the Nevilles, hedging one's bets was a strategy for survival. After battles like Towton in 1461 or Hexham in 1464, fortunes could change overnight, and the Parrs, by keeping a foot in both camps, kind of like the Stanleys, managed to emerge intact no matter who claimed the upper hand. By the end of the 15th century, the family had positioned itself well. Their loyalty to Richard III didn't prevent them from making the transition smoothly to Henry VII's rule after Bosworth in 1485. They weren't wealthy magnates, nor were they ancient aristocracy, but they were solidly in place in the gentry class with enough estates and enough loyalty to be useful to the Tudors. It's worth noting that by the time Katherine Parr was born in 1512, Kendal Castle itself was already falling into decline. The family seat associated with her childhood was not the ruined fortress in Westmoreland, but rather their household at Blackfriars in London, close to court. The link between Katherine and Kendal Castle is a romantic one made by later generations, when the ruins became tied in local memory to the queen who bore the name of Parr. The Parr's real story in the late medieval period isn't one of seizing castles or founding dynasties, but of survival and moving forward gradually. They were never the dominant house in the north. That honor went to the Nevilles and the Percys, but they managed to keep themselves relevant and respected. Through marriage into the de Ross family, loyal service to the Nevilles, and a reputation for steadiness and loyalty, they survived the shifting political winds of late medieval England and emerged ready to take their place on the Tudor stage. The real turning point for the Parr family came with Sir Thomas Parr, born around 1483. He embodied the family's shift from northern gentry to figures of real significance at the royal court. Thomas was the great-grandson of Sir William Parr of Kendal, and he inherited not only lands in Westmoreland, but also a sense that the family's future lay closer to the crown than to the windswept castles of the north. Thomas Parr's career unfolded under Henry VIII, where he found a place in the king's household. He held offices in the north, but more importantly, he gained connections with the great Neville family, cementing the Parr's link to one of the most powerful northern dynasties. His loyalty and his service earned him a knighthood, and while he never became one of the kingdom's leading magnates, he was respected as a capable and ambitious courtier. Thomas's marriage proved even more influential. He married Maud Green, a woman of strong courtly connections, who was serving as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Katherine of Aragon. This match tied the Parrs firmly into the circle of the Tudor court and gave their children a direct link to royal service from birth. Maud herself was a woman of learning and piety, remembered for her devotion to Catherine of Aragon and her own interest in education. Through her, the Parr children were raised with an emphasis on reading, religious study, and humanist ideals that were just beginning to spread through England. Thomas and Maud had 3 surviving children, Katherine, William, and Anne. Each of them would leave their mark on Tudor history, but their paths were shaped by the environment that their parents created. At their household in Blackfriars, the children had access to teachers and books and the intellectual atmosphere of the court. Unlike many provincial gentry families, the Parrs were raising their heirs in the heart of the kingdom's political and cultural life. Sir Thomas died in 1517 when his children were still quite young. This might have spelled disaster for a family whose fortunes rested on his courtly position. But Maud Green Parr took the reins. As a widow, she made sure to continue her children's education, and she cultivated their connections at court. Her role as a mother and a patroness cannot be overstated. She positioned her son William to serve the king, she secured Anne's placement as a lady-in-waiting, and she laid the foundation for Catherine's eventual rise to queenship. In the Parr story, it was the marriage that opened doors. Thomas Parr brought the respectability of the northern gentry line, while Maud Green contributed her direct service to Queen Katherine and her close ties at court. Together, they placed their children into a world far removed from Kendal's windswept hills, one of humanist teachers, royal favor, and opportunity. Without Maud's connections and Thomas's ambition, Katherine, William, and Anne Parr might never have stepped so confidently into the Tudor world. So let's talk about Katherine. Born in 1512, she was the oldest child of Sir Thomas and Maud. Her childhood was shaped by her mother's strong courtly ties and the commitment to education, and that was very different than most northern gentry daughters. Katherine was fluent in several languages. She was well read in scripture and humanist thought, and unusually well prepared to take on roles of influence in a period where women were rarely encouraged to step far beyond the domestic sphere. Her path to Henry's throne, though, was anything but direct. She married 4 times before her death in 1548, and each marriage reveals a stage in both her personal development and the family's steady climb. Her first marriage was to Sir Edward Burgh, the son of a Lincolnshire gentleman. The match was advantageous enough to cement alliances, but it wasn't anything particularly dazzling. Catherine's father was already passed away by this time. Her mother was still working to secure her children's futures. Katherine lived with Burgh at his family's modest estate, but he died within a few years, leaving her widowed in her early 20s. Far from being a setback, though, this gave her a degree of independence and control over her next marriage choice. Her second marriage was a step upward. She became the wife of John Neville, Lord Latimer, a wealthy widower nearly twice her age. As Lady Latimer, she presided over large estates in the north. She cared for Neville's children and became deeply involved in the responsibilities of an aristocratic household. But this marriage also brought her dangerously close to rebellion. During the Pilgrimage of Grace in 1536, when Northern Catholics rose up against Henry VIII's religious reforms, rebels stormed Latimer's house and forced him to join their cause. Katherine endured terrifying months when her home was overrun, and she and her stepchildren were held under guard. Latimer later managed to reconcile with the crown, but the episode gave Katherine firsthand experience of the dangers of politics and religion in Henry's England. Widowed again in 1543, Katherine returned to court. And there she caught the eye of Henry VIII, who by then was in his early 50s, obese and increasingly ill. Katherine, though, wasn't just a convenient bride. She was intelligent, compassionate, and deeply devout, qualities that Henry valued as he sought stability in his final years. Their marriage in July of 1543 made her queen consort, and with it, Katherine stepped into one of the most dangerous roles in England. As queen, Katherine showed remarkable political and personal skill. She worked to reconcile Henry with his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. She helped to restore them to the line of succession. She also acted as regent in 1544 when Henry led a campaign in France, overseeing the kingdom in his absence, a role that was rarely entrusted to a queen consort. It had been given to Catherine of Aragon, and that's when Catherine won the Battle of Flodden, but that's the only other time that Henry made one of his queens the queen consort. Her household became a hub for scholars, reformers, and writers. She published 2 devotional works, Prayers or Meditations, and later Lamentations of a Sinner, making her the first Queen of England and the first woman in England to publish under her own name. Catherine's religious leanings, however, almost cost her everything. By the late 1540s, factions at court were bitterly divided between the conservative and reformist groups. Bishop Stephen Gardiner and Lord Chancellor Thomas Wriothesley saw Catherine as a threat, accusing her of heresy. A warrant for her arrest was even drawn up in 1546, but Catherine's quick thinking saved her. She was warned in advance about the threat to her, and then she presented herself to Henry not as a reformist rival, but as a humble wife who only argued scripture to distract him from his pain. Flattered, Henry embraced her, and when the soldiers came to arrest her, he publicly rebuked them, which would have been really confusing for them, I'm sure. Like, wait, hang on, you approve this. What? Anyway, Catherine had outmaneuvered her enemies with a performance that probably saved her life. After Henry's death in January 1547, Catherine married for the 4th time to Thomas Seymour, the ambitious brother of Henry's 3rd wife, Jane Seymour. We talked about them last week in the episode on the Seymours. This marriage was super risky. Thomas was politically dangerous and openly flirted with the young Princess Elizabeth, who was living in Catherine's household. Catherine became pregnant for the first and only time, but she died in September 1548 at Sudeley Castle, likely of childbed fever, leaving behind an infant daughter, Mary Seymour, who disappears from the historical record soon after. Catherine's life is often summed up with that rhyme about Henry's 6 wives: divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, with Catherine holding the final word. But survived doesn't fully capture her. She was more than Henry's last wife. She was a patron of learning, a religious writer, a peacemaker in a fractured family, and a survivor in a court that consumed most people who entered it. For the Parr family, she was the crowning achievement of generations of ambition and endurance. While Catherine's place in history was secured through her marriage to Henry, her younger brother William Parr tried to carve out his own path to prominence. Born in 1513, William inherited the family estates after their father's death and, was shaped by his mother Maud's determination to secure influential positions for her children. His career shows the opportunities and pitfalls of Tudor politics for ambitious men without the backing of a great noble house. His early career was promising. He served Henry VIII in military and court capacities, eventually earning the title of Baron Parr of Kendal in 1539. His fortunes really began to climb under Edward VI, whose Protestant leanings matched his own. In 1547, he was elevated to Marquess of Northampton. This was a significant title that placed him among the leading peers of the realm. His Protestant sympathies, coupled with his sister Catherine's influence as Queen Dowager, gave him access to power at the very highest level. But his personal life nearly destroyed him. His marriage to Anne Bouchier, the heiress of the Earl of Essex, should have been a triumph. The match brought him wealth and prestige and ties to an ancient noble family. But the union quickly soured. In 1541, Anne scandalized society by eloping with a lover and bearing an illegitimate child. William sought a parliamentary annulment, which was granted in 1552, but the disgrace lingered. It was a very rare case where a noblewoman's actions threatened the standing of her husband. Despite the personal turmoil, though, William remained central to Edward VI's regime. He supported the Duke of Northumberland's attempts to secure the succession for Lady Jane Grey, another Protestant cause. When Mary claimed the throne in 1553, William paid the price for his allegiance. He was arrested for treason, stripped of his titles, and imprisoned in the Tower. For many noble families, such a fall would have ended their story. But, like his sister Catherine, William had a knack for survival. When Elizabeth I came to power in 1558, William's fortunes were restored. His Protestant faith, once a liability under Mary, was now a valuable asset. Elizabeth reinstated him as Marquess of Northampton, and he regained his place among the kingdom's leading nobles. Though he died childless in 1571, his career had mirrored all the normal swings of Tudor politics: meteoric rise, disastrous fall, and very careful, thoughtful restoration. For the Parr family, William represented the male counterpart to Catherine's queenship, a man who reached the peak of noble rank and influence, but whose personal and political missteps kept him forever in his sister's shadow. Still, his story shows just how far the Parrs had come from their Gentry roots in Kendal. They now produced not only a queen, but one of the realm's highest-ranking peers. If Katherine gave the family a queen and William gave them a marquess, their younger sister Anne made sure that the Parr legacy continued through one of the most powerful noble houses of Tudor England. Born in 1515, Anne grew up alongside her siblings in the courtly household that was, of course, like we said, shaped by their mother, Maud. Like Katherine, she was well educated and destined for a life close to the crown. She first entered court as a lady-in-waiting to Catherine Howard, and later to her own sister when Catherine became queen. This dual service placed Anne at the very heart of the Tudor court during some of its most turbulent years. While not as politically outspoken as Catherine, her position was one of influence. Proximity to the queen meant proximity to power, and Anne knew how to move through those corridors carefully. In 1538, Anne made a brilliant marriage to Sir William Herbert, a rising soldier and courtier who would later become the Earl of Pembroke. Now, Herbert was ambitious, loyal to Henry VIII, and ruthless enough to seize opportunity when it appeared. His marriage to Anne Parr bound him to a family that was already climbing, and the match proved mutually beneficial. By the reign of Edward VI, Herbert was one of the kingdom's most powerful men, serving on the Regency Council and commanding immense estates. As the Countess of Pembroke, Anne presided over a household that became a hub of culture and patronage. The Herberts were known for their support of the arts, and Anne herself was remembered as a gracious and intelligent noblewoman. Anne and William Herbert had 3 children. The most important, the one we remember the most, is Henry Herbert, the second Earl of Pembroke. He married Mary Sidney, sister to the poet Sir Philip Sidney, and brought the Parr bloodline into one of the most brilliant literary circles of Elizabethan England. Mary Sidney Herbert became a renowned writer and translator in her own right, patron to poet, and central to the cultural life of the Elizabethan court. Through this union, the Parrs' legacy extended far beyond politics. The family that had once been tenants at Kendal Castle now stood at the very heart of the Elizabethan literary renaissance. Anne Parr herself died in 1552 before her son and daughter-in-law achieved their later prominence. But through her, the Parr family became entwined not only with the politics of Tudor England, but also with the flowering of its culture. So Catherine Parr gave the dynasty a queen. Anne Parr ensured that the family would live on in the poetry, patronage, and intellectual brilliance of the Sidney Herbert circle. By the mid-16th century, the Parrs had risen higher than any of their Kendal forebears could have dreamed. But unlike the Howards or the Seymours, their prominence was brief, and within a generation, the name itself had almost vanished from the ranks of the peerage. The male line ended with William, the Marquess of Northampton, who died in 1571 without legitimate heirs. With him, the titles granted to the Parrs lapsed, and the family name ceased to carry weight in the nobility. His estates were dispersed, and the heraldic arms of the Parrs of Kendal became the stuff of history rather than current politics. The real survival of the family came through Anne Parr's marriage to William Herbert. Long after the Parrs themselves were gone, the Herberts played major roles in the later Tudor and early Stuart courts. The Herbert Earls of Pembroke became noted patrons of literature, and the third Earl was famously one of the dedicatees of the 1623 First Folio of Shakespeare. As for the Parr estates in Westmoreland, Kendal Castle itself had already fallen into decline by the 16th century, like we said, and was abandoned not long after Catherine's death. By the English Civil War in the 1640s, the Parr name no longer featured in the struggles between the king and Parliament. The Herbert family, though, very much did. Philip Herbert, who was then the 4th Earl of Pembroke, was an active parliamentarian, serving as Lord Chamberlain and signing the death warrant of Charles I's supporters, though he later attempted to shift allegiances when the monarchy was restored. Today, there are no titled nobles bearing the Parr name. The line, as a distinct force in the peerage, ended with William Parr in the 16th century. What survives are the ruins of Kendal Castle, Katherine Parr's memory as Henry's last queen, and the lasting prominence of the Herberts, who, through Anne Parr, made sure that Kendal's most famous family would survive far into the Stuart era and beyond. So there we have it, a little bit about Katherine Parr and the Parr family in general. I hope you enjoyed this. You can always leave me a comment wherever you're listening to this. I do enjoy reading your comments and your feedback. Oh, and just a quick note, TudorCon is coming up. When I release this episode, it'll be 2 days. 2 days. Friday, October 3rd, TudorCon begins, and you can join us from anywhere in the world with TudorCon from home. All the talks are streamed, all the entertainment's streamed. You'll get recordings of everything so you can go back and watch at your leisure. All of that good stuff. englandcast.com/TudorCon from home to learn more and get your spot. All right, my friend, hopefully I'll see you online at TudorCon or in person at TudorCon this weekend. I can't wait to reconnect with my Tudor besties and see all of my old friends and meet new friends and see as many of you as possible online as well. It's going to be an amazing weekend. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. I will be back again next week in the post-TudorCon letdown, I suppose. It'll be a lot quieter next week, though. I will say that. It'll be a lot more quiet in my life. Yeah, so I will be back next week. In the meantime, have an amazing week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.